Hello, Sam Valentino, private toon detective here. With this Warner Brothers Discovery mess still going on, some time back I also did a little snooping into the history of WB animation, with the help of a few other fellow toon research aficionados, and learned that a few years back someone had bought a pitch book at the Bill Hendricks Estate sale. For those familiar with Warner Brothers animation history, that Hendricks mug was president of the studio during the infamous Warner Brothers 7 Arts era. That's often been referenced on this YouTube channel, usually in YouTube proof form, such as the popular 7 Arts Setbacks, which was uploaded as a high-definition remaster here 5 months ago. You may recall that during that time, Termite Terrace was largely phasing out the famous and popular Looney Tunes stars from their new theatrical cartoons, as the executives at Warner Brothers 7 Arts felt they already had a vast enough library of cartoons starring said characters for television reruns, and wanted to focus on fresh new original characters for their theatrical shorts. Director Robert McKimson particularly wasn't happy about that, not being allowed to even work with characters he actually created back then, like Foghorn Leghorn and the Tasmanian Devil. This led to some new and albeit less memorable characters that didn't get beyond this turbulent era, such as Rabbit Gangsters Bunny and Claude, Jungle Duo Chimp and Zee, Merlin the Magic Mouse and his sidekick Second Banana, and of course Cool Cat. No relation to that fursuit character promoting gun and bully safety, along with doing a wretched video a couple of years ago about how dangerous the COVID-19 pandemic was then. And also that Beatnik Tiger did end up making a few cameos and occasional new Looney Tunes productions since then, usually to joke on how dated he was. Even from when he first debuted in 1967, Beatniks were, if you pardon the expression, way out by that time, and the hippies had largely taken their place. In the early 1970s, Bugs Bunny himself became a hippie, which is why he was almost never seen for a while. But anyways, Warner Brothers Animation was still trying to come up with new ideas, and this pitch book collects most, if not all, of them. My contact, Jerry Beck, says that it's sold for hundreds of dollars, but the individual pitch sales has just been posted online for everyone to see, and so I'm going to share them here for you all, so we can see what could have been during that troubled era. Or what we're glad didn't happen, largely after Kinney National bought Warner Brothers 7 Arts in 1969 and shut down the animation studio for several years. I just hope with this current Warner Brothers Discovery drama, the animation studio doesn't close up again, given that four-flusher fiend David Zaslav is not too fond of animation. First, let's start off with this pitch, the Lovey Doveys. This is clearly something that would be aimed at more mature audiences, similar to their Norman Normal short, and would have also involved alcoholism, but also focused on marriage problems and jokes. Probably didn't get made due to it most likely not being designed to interest children. This is also why Norman Normal was rarely seen for years, due to it being really out of place with the rest of the Looney Tunes fare, until it got a wider release on DVD in 2008. Of course, this is aimed at the more adult collectors, so that's probably why. Then we have The Misadventures of Robin Hood. Now, the studio had already done some fun shorts based on its story, like Robin Hood Makes Good, Rabbit Hood, and of course Robin Hood Daffy. But I can't imagine them doing a whole series based on the stories. Besides, Disney pulled it off better a few years later with their all-anthro animal version of Robin Hood. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a fox. Time Flies. That's an unusual name for a series. Sounds like it would have been a knockoff of the Peabody and Sherman cartoons, Rocky and Bullwinkle. Looks like it may have been scrapped, but it does sound like parts of this were reworked into that infamous, terrible Speedy Gonzales and Daffy Duck cartoon, See You Later Gladiator. I mean, the Time Machine looks similar, with its alert indicator, and the pitch mentions Nero and Rome as a possible location for the explorers Hap and Stance end up in, which is exactly where Daffy and Speedy ended up in. Maybe Such a Time Flies short with Hap and Stance would have been better than See You Later Gladiator. Maybe just as bad, if not worse. It'll remain a mystery. Another time travel series of shorts is also pitched, with yet another punny named protagonist, Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court. The titular Yankee would end up back in the days of King Arthur, where he would amaze or freak out the king and his people with present-day inventions and trends. Probably would have only worked as a one-shot cartoon. Would have been marginally better than Daffy Duck's King Arthur movie and Filmation's Daffy Duck and Porky Pig Meet the Groovy Ghoulies, which as already mentioned bears an uncanny resemblance to the Warner Brothers 7 Arts cartoons, but with far less movement. And Chuck Jones revisited the concept in 1978 with the Looney Tunes TV special A Connecticut Rabbit in King Arthur's Court, so of course the animation looked a lot better there. Warner Brothers Animation was also planning a series based on the Tales of the Arabian Nights. It's not said if it would have been a series of theatrical Looney Tunes shorts or a TV series of some kind, though in 1968 Hanna-Barbera already had a recurring segment on the Banana Splits Adventure Hour, The Arabian Nights with a K. But this Warner Brothers Animation pitch claims it would be adaptations of the classic stories, as you can probably already tell with some of these pitches. The main problem is that they just don't look very Looney Tunes-ish. That Arabian dancer girl looks like something from a Filmation cartoon. And then you have some fairly out-of-fashion premises, like Toyland, which would have been yet another one of those old toy shop comes to life on closer to night things that nearly every cartoon studio did back in the 1930s, including Warner Brothers having already done one with 1933's We're in the Money. Of course, that was one of the harmonizing merry melodies that United Artists owned at the time. When Warner sold most of the black and white harmonizing merry melodies and the pre-1948 color cartoons to Associated Artists Productions in 1956. So maybe Warner wanted to make such a cartoon they still had the rights to. In the end, it ultimately didn't matter. Toyland was either rejected or didn't happen due to the 1969 shutdown. And with the Turner and Time Warner merger in 1996, Warner Brothers got distribution rights to those aforementioned cartoons again, and still does to this day. Next up is another un-Looney Tunes-ish pitch, Jeanie the Genius. We've already had a bunch of cartoon child geniuses, but they were male, even Warner's own Egghead Jr., so they tried to throw a curveball here by making the child prodigy a girl. The art style already looks very different from how the 7 Arts era cartoons look, let alone the rest of the Looney Tunes franchise. Feels more like something from UPA or Paramount Cartoon Studios. Then there was also a circus-themed series pitch with various titles like The Big Top, Right This Way, Hurry, 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 Here Comes the Circus, and This Way to the Big Show. Had this been made into a series, those titles could have all been used for different shorts. It appears this would have been kind of a Tex Avery-ish circus. And while Warner had already done a few Looney Tunes shorts placing established characters in a circus setting, such as Bugs Bunny's Acrobatty Bunny and Big Top Bunny, and Tweety Circus, and most recently at that time, Cool Cat's 3-Ring Wing Ding, which could have been a test the waters experiment to see if they could do a series about a goofy circus, as there hadn't been such a series before in the industry. Now here's one that wouldn't have been very good. Go Go Gulliver. The way it updates a classic story to be more modern, or using then current devices and fashion combined with new off-the-wall premises. That feels a lot like when Warner Brothers Animation attempted to do that with the 2003 Looney Tunes shorts intended for theatrical release, along with What's New Scooby-Doo, which you've often heard compared to the 7 Arts shorts is here.
Same dog, new tricks, no ascot.
And also like that Scooby series and those 2000s Looney Tunes cartoons, it would have gotten dated pretty quickly. That's not to say all the other Looney Tunes and Scooby-Doo properties are timeless. Then we have Hobo Bo, a comedic homeless bum going on wacky adventures combined with contemporary humor. But hobo cartoons are already pretty much out of fashion by the late 1960s, so this makes yet another such pitch like that. Plus, the name is already too similar to another existing Warner Brothers cartoon, Hobo Bobo, which was more or less Bob McKimson's version of Dumbo. Now this one, Time Train, sounds like it could have been a cartoon in the style of Tex Avery's World of Tomorrow shorts he did at MGM in the late 1940s and early 1950s, along with a few other similar shorts from other studios. But this one would have more of a sci-fi theme, sort of like combining the Jetsons with one of said World of Tomorrow cartoons. Of course, it's set in 2000, which was 23 years ago now, and we've yet to have such a space vehicle to commute us to the moon and back. But NASA still has something like that in the works. Next up, we have Steamboat Phil, a character whose series would have also been based on nostalgia for those old Mississippi riverboats and Tom Sawyer or Huckleberry Finn types. We already had a Bugs Bunny cartoon based on that premise, Mississippi Hare, from 1949. And they also revisited the concept with a 2017 new Looney Tunes short, Riverboat Rabbit. And again, that series has been compared to the 7 Arts cartoons here, with the character designs and animation and the limited repetitive selection of Hanna-Barbera sound effects. A similar pitch features Choo-Choo Jones and his wacky train, the Zip-Along Special. Now this one could have been fun, it's a neat concept. It could be kind of like Porky's Railroad, but with a goofy passenger train, and also presenting a nostalgia for steam trains. As by the time these cartoons were made, most real-life American railroads had switched to diesel and electric locomotives, which were also seen in several Looney Tunes shorts before this era, especially the Roadrunner ones. Also note that so far most of these pitches star human tunes. I guess at this time Warner Brothers felt they already had enough funny animal tunes and decided to go the UPA route with having human cartoon stars. Even animals appear from time to time. Of course, that alone makes them very un-Looney Tunes-ish. As you know, very few of the original Warner Brothers cartoons had all human casts, with the aforementioned Norma Normal being their last one. Next, we have Super Snooper. Of course, Warner Brothers already used that name for a 1952 Daffy Duck cartoon directed by Bob McKimson, where Daffy is a private detective like I am. And Hanna-Barbera also reused that name for their feline gumshoe appearing in the Quick Draw McGraw's show. So again, they're not being very original. The premise here would have been a comedic spy series, no doubt inspired by the Get Smart TV show. We'd have the titular Super Snooper, who would be a bumbling secret agent in the vein of Maxwell Smart, along with his associate the Eye and his secretary Deborah. This could have been a somewhat fun series, and in a way it kind of fit with the Looney Tunes tradition, being a parody series and all. We also had Rock and Rowell, and already you could see how it's barely original, as we've had enough caveman cartoons where they live a modern life, and not just the Flintstones. Warner Brothers Animation already did such a short, 1960s Wild Wild World, directed by Bob McKimson. But they added the concept of Rock here, inventing modern devices and giving them strange names, sort of like on Sesame Street, where Dr. Nobel Price would invent existing things and give them weird names.
Here we have the slasher boats. Ta-da! They're called galoshes. They're not slasher boats. They're galoshes. Everybody's got galoshes.
Galoshes?
Yeah.
Okay, this next one sounds pretty bad. Way Out West. Another attempt at modernizing something by taking the Old West but having characters ride motorcycles and scooters and speaking then current slang referred to as now-type talk. Probably would have quickly become the most dated of all the Warner Bros. 7 Arts cartoons had that materialized. Even worse than Cool Cat. Rather than a Way Out West, it would have been more of a Weird West. And here's another pitch of a really corny pun-based title. Hawaii? I'm okay. It's yet another attempt by Warner Bros. Animation trying to be relevant with a cartoon series that's not like the usual Looney Tunes fare. It even mentions that it would have had singing from the late Hawaiian musician Don Ho. And then 35 years later, WB Animation would indeed get Don Ho to sing in Aloha Scooby-Doo, which is pretty much what Hawaii I'm Okay would have been like, but more realistic and down-to-earth, save for Scooby himself. Now for another really out-of-fashion pitch for the late 1960s. The villain still pursues her. Warner Brothers Animation and other cartoon studios already did a better job parrying those old-timey melodramas back in the 1930s. And earlier in that decade, Jay Ward did a really funny take on them with Dudley Do Right. Something tells me this would have basically just been a far less funny version of Dudley Do-Right set in America. And the description also mentions it's going to be a 3-part serial episode. I can't imagine a 6-minute short being presented that way. So maybe it's going to be a Saturday morning TV cartoon? Probably wouldn't have been very successful regardless. And even Hanna-Barbera did a better spoof of those melodramas with the Wacky Races spin-off TV series, The Perils of Penelope Pitstop in 1969. Another new human Looney Tunes character that was planned but never saw the light of day was Jolly Roger. He would have been a Yosemite Sam-esque pirate that was a fun-loving prankster rather than a hot-tempered villain, even if he could sometimes lose his cool. Had to spend Greenland for a series. I suspect it would have lasted for maybe a few shorts. Heck, I could even see him crossing over a Cool Cat for one cartoon, given that Bob McKimson had Cool Cat go solo in 1969 and no longer deal with that Colonel Rim fire. They also plan to make a series of shorts based on Max Sennett's Keystone Kops franchise, and even go as far as having some shorts written and planned for production. And that probably wouldn't have been a bit easier than the other pitches, given that it was an adaptation of an existing property, and a few other cartoon studios over the years had such success adapting such comic characters into animation, most notably the Fleischer Brothers with Popeye, along with famous studios continuing the Popeye cartoons and adapting Little Lulu into theatrical animation. And I suspect Warner Brothers Animation wanted a taste of that. I wonder if it would have been still in the Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies brand, or maybe a new series, the latter being likely given they did that with Popeye and Little Lulu. But Kinney National buying Warner Brothers, kicking out 7 Arts, and closing down the animation studio prevented that from happening. Similarly, Warner Brothers Animation was also planning a primetime animated TV series based on the Little Abner comics, but that got the axe too in the studio's closure. Yet another new human character Warner Bros. Animation had planned was the absent-minded Mr. Memo. He was basically like UPA's Mr. Magoo, but rather than being nearsighted, he has dementia, which is no better and would certainly not fly today. This was also likely an attempt to cash in on the success of Disney's absent-minded Professor live-action movies earlier in the decade. Another pitch introduces us to Paddy O, the leprechaun. Aside from the punny name based on dated beatnik slang, the pitch summary also mentions that Paddy O would have made his debut in a Speedy vs. Daffy cartoon. Really? They were going to send Speedy Gonzales and Daffy Duck to Ireland for something like that? Jeez. But maybe the crew at Warner Brothers Animation realized it wasn't going to work, in addition to pulling the plug in the Speedy vs. Daffy series, and they most likely retooled it into the 1969 Merlin the Magic Mouse cartoon Shamrock and Roll, where he and Second Banana meet with a more rascally leprechaun named O'Reilly with a fondness for watches and clocks. And speaking of characters spun off of existing properties, a few of the one-time characters seen in shorts starring established characters were also pitched to get their own series of Looney Tunes shorts. One of them was Lo, the poor Indian, as seen in Merlin the Magic Mouse's Hocus Pocus Powwow from 1968. This would have expanded on this dopey Native American stereotype, showing his wife and son and his neighbors in the tribe. This would explain why Lo got credited in the short's opening credits.
Portable warpath!
I guess it's a good thing this never came into fruition, as these stereotypes of indigenous Americans were already getting under hot water by the late 1960s, even though that didn't stop the studio from revisiting the concept with their final theatrical short, 1969's Injun Trouble starring Cool Cat. They even reused the gag of a typewriter creating smoke signals from this pitch. There was also another pitch for giving the antagonists of a Merlin the Magic Mouse cartoon their own series, the Feudin Mountain Boys, originally seen in 1968's Feud with a Dude, and again they got credited in the cartoon's opening. Of course, the whole Martin, or Hatfield and McCoy Hillbilly feud has been a classic subject for cartoons, including a few older Warner Brothers shorts like Naughty Neighbors and Hillbilly Hair, along with the controversial segment for Disney's Make Mine Music package film for 1946, The Martins and the Coys. I wondered that such controversy is a reason why the Feudin Mountain Boys didn't make it into their own series. Or there was the closure of Warner Bros. Animation. But the McCoy hillbilly here did make a cameo 15 years later in Daffy Duck's Fantastic Island, in the line of characters waiting to make a wish at the magic well. Oh, and those two characters in front of and behind McCoy, they are the very mysterious, hysterical Hiram and Hoppy, known for appearing on that 1981 Looney Tunes character chart, also featured as a picture puzzle. It's possible that they too were characters devised during the Seven Arts era, but never saw the light of day. But maybe someday I, Sam Valentino, can solve the mystery on why those particular characters are so mysterious. They also plan to make a series of cartoon shorts starring a character debuting in a cool cat cartoon, and the Beatnik Tiger's weakest one, Spooky, from 1968's Big Game Hunt. If you've seen that cartoon, and it's not a great one by the way, Spooky was more or less an obvious knockoff of Casper the Friendly Ghost, trying to make friends with living characters that are instead terrified by the fact that he's a ghost. And this series would have also given Spooky a human friend, a fearless human boy named Buddy. No relation to that bland 1930s Looney Tunes star, who's even worse than all the Seven Arts characters combined. I bet if this got made into a full series, Harvey Entertainment could have sued Warner Bros. Seven Arts for ripping off Casper the Friendly Ghost, especially since Casper had a friend also named Spooky, the tough little ghost. So maybe they eventually realized that and scrapped the idea of giving Spooky his own cartoons to star in. But his design got reused somewhat for the ghosts appearing in 1987's The Ducksorcist cartoon. And Spooky did later appear in a 1999 episode of the Sylvester Tweety Mysteries, which was fond of often referencing Cool Cat whenever possible.
Sorry, wrong picture.
Another pitch here that doesn't appear to be for a Looney Tunes cartoon is Lost Atlantis, or Captain Bravo, or Cruising to Neptune. It was clearly going to be a TV series, as by this time Warner Brothers already had rights to Johnny Cypher Dimension Zero animated series, co-produced by Joe Oriolo and several Japanese animation studios, and distributed by Seven Arts Television. And I suspect that Warner Bros. Seven Arts wanted their own in-house action-adventure TV cartoon series, now having their own animation department and all. Also no doubt inspired by the success of similar shows, produced by Filmation and Hanna-Barbera, and it probably would have been meant for Saturday morning television. And had this materialized, it would have been Warner Bros. Animation's very first action cartoon series, predating Batman the Animated Series by 25 years or less. And now the studio is known for its action-adventure shows and movies, especially ones featuring DC Comics characters, and I'm also reminded of how much of their 2000s output was of action cartoons. Even Scooby-Doo got retooled into one with What's New Scooby-Doo, and the infamous Shaggy and Scooby-Doo Get a Clue. And the less said about Lunatics Unleashed, the better. Sandra Schwartz was an even worse four-flusher than Bill Hendricks was when it came to running Termite Terrace. But I guess with Lost Atlantis, if it wasn't for the studio's closure in 1969, it was the backlash from violent cartoons on Saturday mornings at the time that put an end to that series' development. And you may recall how Norman Normal, as I already mentioned a few times, was a Warner Bros. Seven Arts cartoon special, rather than being a Looney Tunes or Merry Melodies entry. And in addition to more Norman Normal shorts as well, they also had a few other special installments planned. One was a holiday-themed title, Christmas Story, touted as a Warner Bros. Seven Arts Christmas special, split into two sections, starting with a serious but beautiful telling of the Three Wise Men, before the jarring shift to a comical story about Santa Claus at the North Pole. That wouldn't work as a 6-minute short. Perhaps it could have been a theatrical featurette, with the two halves running as 10-minute segments, or maybe a half-hour TV special. But if it were the former, no doubt it'd later be rerun as a network TV special every holiday season, like Mickey's Christmas Carol and Olaf's Frozen Adventure were. In that case, the Three Wise Men segment would have been pretty neat to see, especially WB Animation attempting realistic detailed art and animation in a precursor to their 1990s DC Comics shows. The closest we got were a few brief segments in those Lockheed Aircraft drug abuse educational films Warner Brothers Animation produced in 1969. Were otherwise cartoony productions. You know, the ones that the caveman professor got featured in a YouTube poop here 4 years ago. Well, there was also one where the professor played a modern-day attorney. Another planned special that would have most likely been a featurette was Innocents Abroad, or Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn Abroad. It would have been a combination of live action and animation, involving Merlin the Magic Mouse's second banana taking the live action Tom and Huck from their live home in Missouri to all across the globe, representing locations like London, Paris, Copenhagen, Switzerland, Vienna, Rome, Giza, Egypt, and Tokyo, all represented as animated worlds before returning the boys back to their live action Missouri home. If that sounds familiar to you, that's because it's very similar to Hanna-Barbera's 1968 primetime television series, The New Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, a combination live-action animation series where Tom and Huck, along with Becky Thatcher, find themselves lost in McDougal's cave while trying to avoid Injun Joe, where they enter different exotic animated worlds and befriend their inhabitants. It originally aired on NBC, and later found new life in syndicated reruns of the Banana Splits. I've got a wild hunch that somehow Warner Brothers 7 Arts learned of Hanna-Barbera producing the New Adventures of Huckleberry Finn TV show, and that they shelved Innocents Abroad to avoid any conflicts. A particularly interesting pitch for what looked like another special series of shorts was an animated take on Puff the Magic Dragon that was most likely going to be another collaboration akin to Norman Normal. And yes, they were planning more Norman Normal cartoons. And since they were both based off Peter, Paul, and Mary songs, this time Peter Yarrow would have most likely been involved. And he probably would have also wrote the music and done some voice work, the way his partner Paul Stuckey did for Norman Normal. But the story the pitch presents is very different from the song, where Puff finds himself in modern times and finds it difficult to adapt, especially with his fire breath that irks an antagonistic fire chief. Of course, this was also scrapped, thanks to the studio's closure in 1969. Of course, later on, Peter Yarrow would team up with Murakami Wolf Swenson to produce 3 Puff the Magic Dragon TV specials from 1978 to 1982, airing on CBS and starring Burgess Meredith as Puff. And yes, Peter Yarrow did the music for those specials and also performed a couple of voices, and they were definitely more in line with the song compared to Warner Brothers 7 Arts Animation's idea for such a cartoon. They also planned to do a special with 2 of their most popular characters, Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner, appearing in The Roadrunner Cavalcade with the Birdwatcher. This is going to be a half-hour featurette where a live-action birdwatcher, presumably played by a comic actor celebrity, watches the Roadrunner and Coyote in action, presumably mostly through clips from older cartoons, though there might have been some new animation thrown in as well. And look at how Wile E. is drawn there. Reminds me of how he appeared in Filmation's Daffy Duck and Porky Pig Meet the Groovy Ghoulies, and in promoting Plymouth Motors' Roadrunner line of automobiles. Warner Brothers Animation produced some commercials in 1968 to 69, featuring the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. The first one directed by Alex Lovey and looking similarly ugly, and the rest by Bob McKimson. Now, in this pitch book, there were a few pitches that did get made to finish cartoons, but each didn't get past one short, either due to it not working out or because the studio's closure. There's a pitch for Flying Circus, a cartoon produced and then released in September 1968, directed by Alex Lovey. But the characters' designs were changed a little, ending up looking more like the Paddy Fillings Roland and Ratfink. And rather than being named Captain D Patrol and Count Von Clunker, they are renamed Ace and Fritz, no doubt to cash in on the Snoopy versus the Red Baron trend. I've deducted that among learning that Paddy Frilling was developing Roland and Ratfink, they retooled Flying Circus to be similar, to try and beat them to the punch. especially since Roland and Ratwing's first cartoon was also a World War I airplane dogfight story, Hawks and Doves, released 4 months after the Flying Circus. Ultimately, Roland and Ratwing continued as a recurring series for the Paddy Feeling United Artists until 1971, while Ace and Fritz didn't make it past that one cartoon.
Ach, meine Mutter hat mir gesagt, es wird solche Tage geben.
Another pitch presented, and this is Chimp and Zee, made into a finished cartoon released in October 1968, and again directed by Alex Lovey. But in this pitch, the boy is named Lonzo, while the chimp is unnamed, yet in the finished cartoon, the boy is presumably just named Z, hence the title. The pitch definitely plans for it to be a series, with different foes like wacky explorers, wild savages, hostile jungle beasts, and a weird medicine man. It also mentions that action alone would tell the story, plus sound effects and music, suggesting there would be no dialogue. But in the cartoons, we got the hunter speaking fairly frequently, voiced by Mel Blanc, using the same voice he'd give Wile E. Coyote.
I'm here in the jungle looking for a blue-tailed simian, the rarest of all monkeys.
It ended up being one of the better outings of the Warner Brothers 7 Arts era, with a rare example of good Bill Lava music. But again, ended up not getting very far after one cartoon. And of course, I was also surprised to see one of the pitches included a vulpine some of you here are probably familiar with, the Quick Brown Fox and Jack Rabbit. It was greenlit for production, and Jack Rabbit was retooled into Rapid Rabbit, looking more like the This Quick Bunny, but acting like a weird mishmash between Bugs Bunny and the Roadrunner. And Quick Brown Fox was recolored orange, but retaining his name, making it a little pointless. And he starred in a cartoon released in May 1969, titled Rabbit Stew and Rabbits 2. The finished cartoon has no dialogue, which is a refreshing change of pace, what with all the other 7 Arts era cartoons being really talky, so they use pantomime with visual gags. Something tells me that the director Bob McKinson came up with this cartoon just to annoy the studio executives for not letting him actually use Bugs Bunny or the Roadrunner, hence the X-Piece here. They even used the free trip to the moon canon gag illustrated in the pitch. More cartoons were written, but Warner Brothers Animation's closure that year got them cancelled. It's too bad, because it too was one of the better cartoons of the era, also with a groovy Bill Lava music track for a change. And again, I'm not just saying that because I'm a Toon Fox myself. And there you have it, a whole series of pitches from Warner Brothers Animation in that troubled era of cartoons that were largely nothing like the classic Looney Tunes we know and love. On the one hand, it was good to see him try out new ideas, though, instead of relying on Speedy Gonzales and Daffy Duck cartoons. And those generally just kept getting worse, though ultimately they were planning to replace Daffy with a new foe, Butch Cassidy, a villainous cat resembling the Tasmanian Devil. He probably would have been more appropriate a villain for Speedy Gonzales than Daffy was, but the executives still didn't want the animation studio to use the other classic characters for new theatrical shorts. It's too bad, because they could have also brought back Sylvester to pit against Speedy for some of them, even if he'd been cheapened by the lower budget animation. But if you give him a higher budget to work with, then they could wow you. Like when they did with the animated opening credits sequence in the 1970 Warner Brothers 7 Arts musical comedy spy spoof, The Finks. Much nicer animation there than in those final Looney Tunes shorts. Of course, this could also attribute to the market for theatrical animated short subjects drying up in the late 1960s. Thanks to television and such, there wasn't much need to play a cartoon before a movie or in between a double feature anymore, except for drive-in theaters and a kid matinees. When the Warner Bros. Animation closed in 1969, the only players left in that market were the Paddy Filling shorts distributed for United Artists and Walter Lantz Productions, and the occasional Disney animated short or featurette. The golden age of animation was officially over, and it was getting to be a rough time for us toons that weren't created for TV. I'm also hoping we don't enter yet another dark age of animation. Besides the Warner Brothers Discovery disaster, which, by the way, HBO Max is still going to be separate from Discovery Plus, but will be rebranded and change its name. There's also the way Netflix recently treated animation, Disney and Pixar having suffered financial losses with recent box office bombs, although I'm glad they announced the Zootopia 2, by the way. And the onslaught of raunchy adult cartoons. Hey, I know animation should indeed be for everyone, but I think you're taking it too far. To the point where he even got a raunchy, violent adult series based on the Scooby-Doo franchise. Something originally created for family audiences. And besides, Warner Brothers Animation already went through a second dark age when Sanders Schwartz was president, as I already recall. Weren't 2 dark eras enough? And now Sam Register is planning to step down as president at Warner Brothers Animation, to which the former head of DreamWorks Animation, Bill Damashek, is supposedly going to take his place. Oh jeez. I hope he doesn't turn the beloved Termite Terrace into a DreamWorks Animation clone, churning out cliched assembly line production cartoons relying heavily on celebrity voices and gross humor. I mean, it's bad enough they had Bugs burp and Taz fart and Looney Tunes back in action. I don't want them to resort to doing that smut all the time. Blech. After all, I recall how Sanders Schwartz originally came from Adelaide Productions, Sony Pictures Television's animation company at the time, who had some shows airing on Kids WB. And he pretty much turned the studio into an Adelaide Productions clone, with churning out realistic, serious action cartoons, like I already mentioned, to the point where they forgot how to make a good comedy series or whatever. I still pray that things turn around for the 93-year-old animation studio. But on the lighter side, last month I had fun joining Zach Wolf at Anthro New England 2023, my first convention. Met a lot of his friends and they all thought it was pretty cool, and I enjoyed partaking in some of the events there. This is also their first one held at the Westin Boston Seaport District Hotel, after previously being housed at the Boston Park Plaza Hotel. And this year was our biggest attendance there yet, with 3,538 attendees. And I also did a little detective work there, coming up with the deduction that the con moved to the Westin Boston Seaport Hotel, so that they keep getting bigger and bigger. They can also spread their operations to the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center right next door to the hotel. There's even a covered overpass linking the 2 buildings. Wouldn't be the first time a convention did that. Anthrocon in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is housed in both the Lawrence Convention Center and the Westin Pittsburgh Hotel. And Anime Boston is housed in both the Heinz Convention Center and the Sheraton Boston Hotel. Maybe next year or something, me and Zach will go to Anthrocon. But this year, I'm indeed planning to go to Anime Boston. It'll just be me there, though, but it should be interesting. Wonder if there'll be a mystery for me to solve. But it's definitely no mystery why you mugs should keep watching this YouTube channel to see whatever keepers me, Zach Wolf, or whatever comes up with next.
Woo!